Welcome to HR Masters, a podcast where we sit down and talk about key learnings and best practices with the masters of human resources. Find us through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Now sit back, turn it up, and get ready to get your masters in HR with our host, Jordi Romero.
Welcome to HR Masters. Today we're very happy to introduce an old friend, Albert Alabau, who is currently heading HR at Typeform. How are you doing, Albert?
Fine. Very happy to be talking to you, Jordi.
Funny enough, we're both in Barcelona, but we didn't want to break the system, so we're still doing this remotely. So we could be sitting next to each other and having a beer. So Albert, and we're very proud of having you in the podcast. Could you please tell our audience a little bit, who you are, where do you come from, why are you leading HR at Typeform right now?
So who am I? I won't go too much philosophical. You know that I can speak for a long period of time. So I'm from Barcelona. I've been living here my entire life. But since 2009, I've been working in international companies. So that's why I live in Barcelona, but I consider a little bit of a citizen of the world, married to a Colombian wife as well. So a little bit global. But going to the topic of my background and why am I in HR, to be honest, when I was 17, I had to choose what to study. I wanted to be a cook, but it was really expensive to be a cook back then, and it was not that in fashion as it is nowadays. Talking about more than 20 years ago. So I finally decided to go for other options. Why being a cook? Because I really like cooking. And for me, the experience that people go through when having a meal, all the social, take it from a very anthropological point of view, related to food. It's something that at the end of the day connect people, no? And I was really, really interested in anthropology, in history, and in arts, in things that relate to human beings beyond what is tangible. That's what made me focus in psychology next. But when I discovered that there was a lot of biology and brain studies that I was zero interested in, I finally found the way of relaciones laborales and player relations as a shorter path to get a grasp on what was being known as HR, in the end of the 90s. Yeah, I have an age. So I explored that as a base to get some insights in employee relations, labor law, but also HR and the trends that were coming from the US in a moment where internet was just starting. And I fell in love, with that new trends. I had really good teachers, and I decided to focus strongly in HR and had some generalist roles, some pure HR admin roles in the beginning of my career. I wanted to get a glimpse of different areas so that I could build myself an opinion. Very soon I moved to a generalist role, doing more the hard side of HR, payroll, contracts, but also training, EHS, and also like negotiation with unions, the hard side of HR. And because of that company was expanding globally. It was a construction company that was like family run, but all of a sudden it was the boom in construction, 2005, 2006. That company was expanding internationally. I was one of the few people that spoke English quite fluently. So I was invited to participate in tenders. I was invited to participate in projects that all of a sudden made us recruit people internationally. So I started doing recruitment. I took advantage to do a master's degree in HR, and I just confirmed that that was the path I wanted to follow. So it was my first scale up, moving from 0 people in Barcelona to 200 in a year. Very different profile, in a very different industry. But I just discovered one of my passions, which was international environments and fast pace. And that paved the way so that soon after I tried a pilot in Nestle that didn't work out. But finally end up in Alstom, in the renewable energy business line that was growing exponentially, similar case to previous, and where technology had a very strong components, technology and people. And this is where I learned.
How many people did you have at Alstom? How many people were you?
When I when I joined 550, when I left 1800. So it was like multiplying by 3.5 in 4.5 years, which was like quite a significant growth, and moving from having a quite local footprint, so Spain, Portugal, and France, and a little bit of Italy, to having a global footprint, Latin America, Africa, Japan, North America, and throughout Europe. So it was a different kind of environment than that of pure technology, but at the end of the day, it was a heavily run R&D business. And during my last 18 months, I fell in love doing recruitment for software engineers. And I started implemented an ATS, and learning about some plugins, about something called LinkedIn, that you might have heard of. So what could you do to reach out to hidden talent, connect with people globally? Talking about 2008, so it's 11 years ago. 2008, no, so 2010, 2011. So 8 years ago, more or less. And I really discovered a universe of things that I felt. I was the youngest in the team. I was growing, like promoting every year and a half. I was discovering what a business partner was. I was willing to learn more about business. And all of a sudden, I saw myself like willing to go to a place that things could move forward faster. And that's when I decided to pursue a career in a startup. Even taking the decision of cutting my salary, like reducing significantly my salary, and betting for joining a startup. My wife didn't understand that, but if she backed me back then.
So that's Cytel. That's Cytel, the new startup you're talking about.
I had different options. I was between Softonic and Cytel. Softonic looked much more promising, but things went a little bit south a year later. And Cytel, I had some concerns about the culture, but at the end of the day, it had been a good place, and the project was quite cool so far.
So how did you know about these concerns before you joined the company? Like, did you do a due diligence on your potential employer?
I did my due diligence on my network. I talked to several people. Glassdoor was not that big back then, so the feedback there was not that relevant as the one you can find nowadays. But still, I saw the opportunity of a company that was about to raise money. We didn't know how much money we were going to raise, but Cytel was a company of 180 people, more or less, predominantly based in Spain, a little bit in the US. But the question was the amount of money. And 6 months later, we raised $104 million, which was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, fundraising in Spain back then. And the project was impressive. It was innovating democracy. So what can you find that is as sexy as innovating democracy? I connected a lot, and this is one of the things that also characterized my career in terms of decision making. The previous one was let's make a living out of win. Cytel was let's innovate democracy, and it was pure technology, pure software. So then I moved from having this business partner role, like more of a T-shaped generalist role, focused very close on adding value to the business, working with several departments I was backing, to having a role which was that of a specialist managing a team. I joined as talent acquisition manager to build, from scratch, the talent acquisition department, and use that money to appeal the best talent in the world to help us in multiple locations. So continue to be the number one company in modern in election modernization, which was the very niche market. I can tell you that being 600 people that we were at the peak, we were the market leaders globally. So you can imagine how niche that market was. And that was insane fast growth. We moved from 180 people in November 2013 to 586 people in January 2015. So in a little bit more than a year, it was crazy growth, especially in engineering, in product, but also in sales, in business development, and in marketing.
So that means talent acquisition did an okay job there, no?
Let's say an okay job, because a lot of people that have been there and then left are now in much better positions even. So I think that we have built good people from 27 different countries, which was not that bad back then, knowing what Barcelona was. And
It's true that Cytel also grew inorganically, right? So Cytel had a little shopping spree where the company did many acquisitions around the world, and I'm assuming that's
3 acquisitions, one in the US, one in Canada, and one in Brazil. But we're not big in terms of number of headcount. So the headcount that we grew organically was 80%, 81% of the total growth.
okay. Well, I assume it brings new challenges anyway, right? So having to incorporate existing cultures into the mix and kind of making them blend, that has to be.
It was a huge challenge. It was a huge challenge, and it explains why Cytel is nowadays a company of 120 people. No, why it failed. No, among many different other reasons. No, like public sector is not easy, and over 90% of the revenue came from public sector, with changes in governments every 4 years or even sooner. No, but main story is like, I don't know if you have read the book by Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I strongly recommend it.
I heard about it. Okay, writing it down.
This one.
Okay, nice. We'll add the link to the podcast notes.
So strongly recommend it. It's a fable, but it's explaining quite well what happened there. No, at the end of the day, we were blaming the players, not the game, and what was failing was the game. To make a long story short, I after trying it 3 times, no, I had moved to a director level role there, and helping the leadership team to really overcome the challenges. I didn't see the full buy-in from the, not from the leadership team, but specifically from the CEO, who was someone incredibly brilliant from a business perspective, but like was not probably ready back then to assume the changes that most of us thought that were needed. And I decided that I didn't want to waste my time. So I was looking for early stage, and it's when I found Travelperk, and I connected immediately with founders, especially with the CEO, Avi, who was talking me when they were 10 people, was talking me about buying airplanes, no, with the name of Travelperk on it. And I was like, this guy is either crazy or brilliant or both of them, no? So
probably both so far from what we've seen.
After nearly 3 years there, I can tell you that he's crazy, but amazingly brilliant.
So Travelperk is one of the highest growing companies in Barcelona at the moment, if not the highest growing company. No, when did you join the company? How many people were there?
Before I answer to this, is the fastest growing company in Europe, and the 5th highest growing company in the world of SaaS B2B.
Okay.
So I joined being number 17. I left being 200, and I think that they are now 223, 225, more or less. So they keep on growing, and the plan is to continue to grow to nearly 400 people by the end of this year.
So at 17, I'm assuming you were the first HR person that the company hired. Was your mandate more to hire more people or to manage the existing people? What did Avi ask you to do?
It's a mix of both, especially because Travelperk had just raised Series A, $5 million back then, and we had an MVP that we needed to bring to the market and see how much traction could we create out of that. And at the same time, we knew, because we had a better product back then, we knew that it had all the ingredients to become a successful product. So the objective was double, was building the team and helping the team grow, but especially helping the company to prepare for the scale up, because we knew that Travelperk could either be like 200 people at the end of 2018, 150 or 250, but it was not meant to be 50 people, no? So we started, my recommendation was to start to focus on the leadership team. Let's build a very, very solid leadership team, a mix of people that have been there, done that, a mix of industry experts in terms of travel and e-travel, and people that come from SaaS, because Travelperk had the complexity of being, on one hand, a SaaS business model, but an e-commerce and a travel agency, or an e-travel, and an online travel agency. Sorry, I was looking for the word. And we built a leadership team based on that, and we set the grounds to scale up. So
what does it mean to build a leadership team? I mean, it sounds very easy when you say it like that, but what did you have, right? Because you had 3 founders with different skill sets, And how did you detect what you were lacking in the leadership team?
We had two founders because the third co-founder and the former CEO had already left the company and was advising the company only, but was no longer there. So we had two founders, one Javi, who was the creative mind, extremely passionate, like passion never fails kind of person, and someone who had like 25 ideas that needed someone to help him land. And Abby was more like someone who also was extremely passionate and extremely creative, but someone who talked business, someone who was well connected and someone who was learning to be a CEO, but had already been an entrepreneur and had a strong product background and people management background. So what I was missing there was someone who they really were interested in taking care of people. They genuinely were interested in caring of people, but they wanted to create a high performing culture. And I spent some of the few initial days talking about them. What does a high performing culture mean to you? What do you expect? Do you expect people working 24/7, working 80 hours a week, like in Silicon Valley? And we reached somehow an agreement, that they wanted to create a culture where people work like 40 hours a week with as much flexibility as possible, but also people that found the joy, and the thrill, out of their work, and that were hungry enough to be able to contribute to the impact and grow with the company. So we soon started to talk about culture and values, not in a fluffy way. They are pure fire, and so we started talking about a very easy handbook approach, which is like culture is what allows you to make decisions. It's like how do you make things, and empowers people when the lights go off. So mainly it was a very practical and pragmatic approach. And after that, we came to the conclusion that we needed this bunch of experts. So the subject matter experts that also were really, really good at people management, so that they could not only bring a solution nowadays, be hands-on enough to implement it, but that they could also be good at recruiting that people and building that team.
And who finds executives? I mean, it's a very hard thing to do, right? To hire like an experienced domain expert and kind of like good fit with the rest of the leadership team. How do you do that?
Well, especially when you're at early stage, you don't have 90K or 100K to go and pay a headhunting agency, most of the time. So you have them, but you have to use them to pay for other.
To pay the salaries, actually.
Because your run rate is quite limited. So survival mode is what helps you find ways to reach out to these people. I've always worked on my network, and I've always been active in finding alternatives in terms of reaching out to talent. So it was mainly me, but not me. It was me facilitating that the network we had inside of the company, inside of the PCs that had invested, turned out into a diaspora, that helped us reach to more people. And we implemented a methodology to handle recruitment based on a book. I think that you heard of it as well. The Who, a book by Jeff Smart, about focusing on who you hire, not other reason on the person that will make the difference, an A player. And that made a big difference because we were recruiting out of outcomes. So what do we expect from that person coming here and sitting in this chair? And we expect this person to bring us to this level. We expect this person to hire X amount of people, train them, and put, I don't know, our CRM Salesforce into place, and and increase the number of customers in X%. So we turned it into something that was very much actionable in the short-term strategy of a startup, and that also helped us, after talking to lots of people, realizing who had that and who didn't have it. So it was mainly us together, and me particularly, like doing a lot of research, direct search, through starting with TechCrunch and Crunchbase, seeing what companies were in a similar stage a couple of years ago. So that establishing some patterns, doing some research on where can I find people that has been there and done that and might be willing to go back or might be willing to do that again as the head of that department. So basically it was that. And then once we had the team in place, it was about, we had a great bunch of individuals, all of them very talented and very smart and very much aligned towards achieving amazing goals, but the next level was like making them become a team. So we did a lot of work about relational styles, about what is the most efficient way to manage people. Something that was very, very practical, but that helped us to build a tone, combined with the culture and the values. That how did we align from our own personal values, and build a famous ready to disagree and commit. How we build that basis for a high performing team, so that then we can cascade it down when creating new layers of management. Like I told you, one objective was growing, but the other one was scaling up the company. So that could easily permeate when we started training people that was becoming managers or team leads, reporting to these people in the following months and years.
Okay, so before, I have like 25 questions I want to ask you right away, but I want to let you finish your story, because you're still at Travelperk, but you're not sitting at Travelperk's office right now.
No, I'm sitting at Typeform's office. And well, at Travelperk, I saw, like I told you, I joined after the Series A. I saw the Series B, the Series C, and I saw the business valuation multiply by multiple X. When we were nearly 180 people, I was in conversations with Typeform. And well, one thing led to another. I was very, very happy and very much in love. Somehow Travelperk is my baby, and I have really good relationship with all of them, with Avi, the CEO, and I have good friends there. But I felt that somehow I knew what was coming there, and this opportunity was a train that I wanted to pick and try. And that's what brought me here in January this year.
So Typeform, just for context, everybody in Barcelona knows Typeform. Almost everybody in the startup scene in Europe and in the world knows Typeform. It's one of the classic B2B SaaS companies. It's one of the companies that Barcelona is proud of hosting. Just went through a CEO change recently, and I guess that meant leadership team reinforcements and overall changes and evolution in the business. So that's kind of like the moment that kind of push them to talk to you and I guess try to hire new HR strength in the company.
I was recruited by the person that very soon became the new CEO, and that was already part of the equation and was on the table, and with the objective of reshaping some of the things that were not working well, without losing the things that magic, that made a company like Typeform become very successful and very much loved by its customers and its employees. Extremely people focused person, very customer centric company and design driven company, which is not that frequent, unfortunately, in Europe, especially in B2B SaaS companies. So not losing this magic, but helping the company turn into execution, like improving the body performance without losing the heart and soul, to make a long story short. And that's what I've been doing so far, recruiting a new CFO, a new chief product officer, a new chief operations officer, and we have revamped almost entirely the leadership team. Some of the people were acting in the role, and they were part of the solution. That's one of the great parts of Typeform. It's a very honest, very transparent company in the sense that people is not afraid to raise a hand and say, I'm probably not the best person to do that, or I might be willing to collaborate. And this is extremely unusual. In Spain, at least, it's extremely unusual, and it speaks highly, as well, of the two founders, that were the ones promoting the change, stepping aside, and they are being incredibly collaborative, incredibly backing Kim, the new CEO, to really be as successful as possible. And here's where I am.
Super interesting story, Albert. Thanks for sharing us with you your story. So now that we know who you are, you mentioned a lot of things that I would like to touch base on. One of the things you mentioned a couple of times is we had to build, all of this leadership team. We had to transform this company. We had to grow very fast. We have to lay strong foundations. And you also mentioned culture, values, but not these fluffy, touchy things. And you mentioned the concept of a business partner. Your own background is maybe not the usual high-tech company HR person who starts recruiting because it tends to be the first problem they have. You actually started with the hard HR, even administrative stuff, then moved on to more generalist, then into recruiting, then into this business partner role. So what is a business partner? What does it mean?
For me, it's someone who lives and breathes business, no? Someone who is ideally sitting nearby the decision makers in the departments or the business unit that they are supporting. Someone who understands what are the business drivers, the way success in that business is being measured, the KPIs, no? To a level that understand the business model of the company and can help others understand it as well. No, like I see a newbie and landing, and the business partner being the one taking care of that onboarding and helping the person really understand that. No? Why? Because being an HR person, you always have the people in your head, and it's impossible to disconnect them from the business. No, unfortunately, or at least it's the reality I've seen so far. Not all business leaders have people, as part of the equation. No, sometimes it's like the needed issue, no, that they have to deal with to reach the business goals. No,
The necessary evil.
the necessary. Exactly. So what a business partner can do is, without adding this touchy-feely part that some people might have perceived in HR, like happiness and all this stuff that might sound like a little bit fluffy. It's helping the business keep the perspective and keep the human being connected to that reality, and especially because there is nothing that can vary the most, no, depending on the mood, depending on the motivation, depending on many intrinsic and extrinsic factors that can have an impact on the company productivity. And at the end of the day, if you want to have the best productivity, have the best and the most motivated people, no, and individually speaking. But if you take it to a next level, it's like build an amazing team, no, and that has to be balanced, no. So business partner is someone who is very close to the business, understands HR, that has a solid understanding of HR policies, best practices, recruitment, learning and development, comp and ben, that is very well connected in the network, someone that can easily find answers, no, to complex business situations that pop up on a daily basis impacting people, and someone who also can put in place, and anticipate things that will help these business leaders to make the best decisions and avoid facing some issues that might not be taken into account if you don't have a figure like that nearby.
So how many percentage points do you think is people, and how many would be business in the business partner role? Is it 50-50? Is it mostly people, or is it mostly business?
For me, it's close to 50-50, but I would say leaning towards people 60-40.
Okay, and so the other question is, like, a lot of things you described sounds to me also a little bit like this COO role, right? So operations of a business. I mean, people are an very important part of the operations of a business, but you also mentioned, priorities, the strategy, like collaborating together, how the business functions, detecting gaps, detecting opportunities. This is also something that a COO would be involved in. So do you think business partner and potentially a COO are related positions? Do you think one is the evolution of the other, or they have nothing to do?
I don't know if one is the evolution of the other. What I can tell you is, like, I fully agree with what you describe, and what I can tell you is, like, especially in the markets that are less conservative than that of Spain and Europe. Like, if you can see the North American market, especially the US market, you will see people that nowadays are holding COO roles that were, like in HR like 10 years ago, and vice versa. No, people that have been in the COO role that end up being in HR. Why? Because especially you take the two parts, no, the operations and the people not managing the operations, and it connects very, very, very well.
I mean, people plus operations, that's a huge part of a business, so good luck with that. There is a role I like a lot that's become it's becoming a little bit more popular now in the business area, which is chief of staff, right? That's a concept that I think in politics, and especially since the White House has a very famous role, which is the chief of staff, popularized it. I think chief of staff is like the right hand of the business leader or the leader in general of an organization, which kind of does what you described as a business partner, but maybe with a higher level of authority or responsibility. So it's an interesting position. You mentioned another thing that I found interesting, which is, a lot of the stuff you did to grow this team so fast, right? You went from 17 to 200 people, from 100 to 600. I forgot the numbers, but they're huge multipliers with very short periods of time. One of the key things I saw in the companies you've been at is this huge brand these companies have in terms of talent, right? There's this employer branding thing. I've seen you guys operate. We're close in the same city, and we fight for the same talent in the market. And I see the investment you do or you've done in your previous companies as well in employer branding, and it's very impressive. How do you do that? What is your secret in being so aggressive in this brand?
Well, first of all, I want to mention that I've always been lucky enough to be working with amazing managers and people that inspired me, and I've been lucky enough to be working with people in my teams reporting to me, but more like working like peers that also inspired me. But were ready to always focus on the solution and go the extra mile. No? And I think that I wouldn't be where I am without these two parts. No? With that said, it's very easy. It's far easier than what you expect. If you have the right environment and people feel happy, and I was obsessed with employee NPS in the beginning at Travelperk to measure the satisfaction of people, but also being very, very open, talking to everyone and sizing, taking the temperature on a regular basis to the organization. If you have that kind of culture that is very open, very transparent, where people thrill, and obviously there's sometimes where people is not happy or some people is not happy, but yeah, as a normal life of any of us can face. But if you're very open and transparent and you can talk about this and you pave the ground and you make it easy for people, generally people tend to be a little bit more lazy in terms of employer branding. What we did is we facilitated things, no? And that's why people became promoters. And first of all, we started doing things, but that sort of virality came out of people that said, "Hey, guys, how can I help you?" We first initially started for help, then obviously we did events, but we always had people willing to collaborate. And you start one thread, and people keep on working on this diaspora, that multiply. So I would say that taking care genuinely and explaining using our culture and our values, like even in a very casual way, who Travelperk was, and we made famous our onboarding process, which was unboxing, a paperback, which was really, really weird, but people loved it, and that somehow became viral. So being genuine about who we were as a company, not overselling, and not explaining a story that was not real, that made our own employees took that very seriously and kept on repeating these messages, not only in social media, but when they were attending to events, when they were talking to their friends. So that helped a lot. I think I can talk a lot about employer branding, but that was the main part of the strategy. People believing in what we were doing and us giving them a voice.
I mean, I guess it also, costs money to do some of those things. I mean, I don't know what this bag contains, but there is also a conscious investment that you do in this brand.
I disagree. Okay. It all started by, on my first day, Travelperk taking a picture of Ness, who was our pet, our dog. Okay. And I think I had I'm not exaggerating, over 10,000 views in less than a week of that post. So all of a sudden, and I was just saying, hey, Ness is here, having fun, who's going to be next to join? If you see the visits to our career site, they grew exponentially. And we were 17, and I didn't even have a paid LinkedIn account. So I completely disagree. If well, I'm giving that as a very early stage example, but even without a very complex strategy on how much budget will you allocate to the different, social media and employer branding initiative, you can do internal events that we started doing, like hosting meetups. And it cost us 300 euros the first meetup, which was like beers and pizzas for like 25 people or 30 people. So we just take a little bit of care of bringing good pizzas and beers, and they were cold enough, and helping people to feel as comfortable as possible. We could only offer that, no. So I don't think it costs a lot of money. Obviously, it's not the same. When I left, we were spending in employer branding and recruitment related stuff an amount that like it was crazy to consider it only 2 years ago. No, we're spending over 50K a year. No, but I disagree that it's a bunch of money. Like the main problem is like some companies spend a lot of money but don't track, don't measure anything. So then after 1 year you say, oh yeah, I've spent, I don't know, 20, 30K in this. What is the return of investment? And then it's difficult to assess if that was worth it or not.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And you mentioned something that made me think of something else. So in a competitive market as Barcelona is and has been for the last few years, there's luckily more and more companies that are growing fast and fighting for talent, both local but also from other parts of the planet. How big is salary in terms of being competitive for talent? What do you think is the order of the important criteria to be able to attract the top talent that we can bring into Travelperk, Typeform, Factorial, Cytle, any business that's based here in Barcelona, for example?
It depends a lot on the stage you are and the kind of talent you're willing to appeal. No, for junior people, that might be much less relevant in the beginning. It might turn more relevant after a few months or even during the first years. It depends also on equity. If you are very early stage and you're giving a significant part of equity at a really good exercise price, so that might be appealing to people that know how to value that and that are ready to value that. But for me, salary plays a very key role when you have gone through the scale up and you have a different maturity level and you want to really appeal very senior people, or when you're even in an early stage but you want to hire that person that will be that paramount, that relevant. That is when salary can be an issue, no? Especially when your run rate is not very, very long and you want to prioritize. But for me, first of all, it comes with the joy or the play that you will find in what you do. So what's in it for you at the end of the day? The second one, it's the growth opportunities. So, okay, I'm going to invest my next couple of years in this project that will pay me less than if I go to a corporate company or multinational company, and maybe making 40 to making 50, makes a big difference in this moment of life. But if you are in your late 20s, making 32 or making 40, maybe it's not a huge difference, even if it's a big amount of money at the end of the month. No? And investing a year or two in that company will make you make 60, in 2 years. So depending on how much do you take care of your career and how much do you bet on yourself. I know people that don't do that, and then when they are 30, they are spending 60K to do an MBA. It depends on your priorities. No, what I see is like what I've learned since I've been in hypergrowth. Every year, it's incredible, no? And it was not about the salary. I always adjusted to the salary I had, and it's not in this case about me. It's about the people I interview and the people I see living. And sometimes the people living, it's not about the salary. It's about the not the mission, but the what's in it for them. No, what will they be able to learn? The people that they will be working with, and what will this do to their even employer or employee value proposition, to their brand as employees, and how will this allow them to be more employable after that?
We see one of the founders of Typeform checking out what you're doing with this. Exactly. That's I have like 25 more questions. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'll try to wrap up, try to make everything. Yeah, you do, and it's very interesting to listen to what you're saying. So let's try to summarize everything you want to share with the last question, which is, what would you like to tell younger Albert, somebody who kind of knows they're going to end up doing HR, that you wish somebody told you when you were younger?
Um, I don't know, man. You got me. I was not ready for this question. First of all, to stay permanently curious, to seek for building a network. And when I say network, it's a think big, like people in our generation maybe it's getting more use, but native digitals might be easier to think big and think about who in the in Latin America, in the States, or in Asia has gone through the same. So connecting with people that has gone through similar stages, and ask, read. Do not make assumptions, but try to use and build a lot of what we were discussing before about data, like build a cohesive way of thinking that they can connect this learning, this constant curiosity and this constant learning with data to prove things, because I think that we have moved from having scarce information 20 years ago when I was starting, to having too much information and being like the need of someone to be successful in HR is like to be able to learn what is the important part, and how to read in between lines. We have HRIS, we have ATS, we have a ton of data that we can work with, and we don't know even how to use it. I'm learning. I'm someone who is learning to be data driven. It's not a skill that comes naturally to me, but specifically it's something that you are not going to be taught at university. So I would say if you want to be successful in HR, aside from all the most normal things, networking, non-stop curiosity, and data focus. Learn from finance, learn from performance marketing, learn from data scientists, and put that together to improve your skills, to level up your skills in HR.
It's a lot of work for young Albert.
For the young and for the not so young, I think that that's something that it's not about doing it. It's not about a sprint. It's more of a marathon. It's about changing the mindset. It's no longer about I do this and I get there. It's more about continuous learning and continuous awareness about what are the trends and what's going to be happening next.
Super interesting story. Congratulations for your new position at Typeform, and thank you so much for joining HR Masters. Thank you, Albert.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys, and continue to rock.
Thanks. That was it for today. See you on the next episode.
If you like this, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to tune in next week to HR Masters.